Good morning, everybody, and welcome to the executive at Northamptonshire Council. And I'd like to welcome all those watching the meeting via YouTube with the live stream. Members are reminded to keep your microphones muted unless invited to speak. If you can ensure your phones are on silent and your laptops are also on silent, that would be appreciated. So we move on to item 1, apologies for absences. Are there any apologies for absences?
There are none, Chair.
Excellent, thank you very much.
Just a quick apology from Councillor Wendy Brackenbury. Councillor Wendy Brackenbury, who's usually in attendance, but sends her apologies.
Thank you very much, Councillor Brackenbury. That will be noted. So we move on to item 2, minutes of the meeting held on the 10th of November 2022. Those minutes are on your agenda packs at page 5 to 30. Are there any comments in respect to their accuracy? Councillor Pentland, sorry.
Thank you, Chair. At the beginning of last meeting, I made a comment regarding an other interest, but I'm not sure it's been recorded. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Councillor Pentland. I'm sure that we'll get that updated for you. Okay, so the can I have a mover and a seconder, please, for the minutes? Mover, Councillor Howe. Seconder, Councillor Harrison. Have a show of hands in favour, please. Thank you very much. So we move on to item 3, members' declarations of interest. Are there any declarations of interest from members? Councillor Pentland.
Thank you, Chair. As part of my role outside of the Council, I may have attended meetings relating to the items being discussed, but come with an open mind on all of them.
Jolly good. Thank you very much. Councillor Lorman.
Yeah, in the development pool list, there is a mention of Sir Christopher Hatton School, of which I'm a director. It's in the development pool, so I don't know whether that is just a personal interest or I take some advice.
So would you like to give some advice on that?
I'll just look into it.
Okay.
We haven't got there yet.
Okay, thank you very much. Item 4, notifications to request the meeting. I have the following speakers: Councillor McGee on item 5. I have Councillor McGee, Councillor Mark Pengelly, who I don't think is actually here, he's still not very well, and Councillor Lynn Buckingham on item 6. Item 11, actually we'll scratch those off because Mark Pengelly's not very well, so that's fine. So we move on to item agenda 5, performance indicator report. And I would like to invite Councillor McGee to address the meeting. You have a maximum of 3 minutes to speak.
Thank you, Chair. Chair, on page 38, MS 12 and indeed MS 13, it's noted performance has fallen below target and the team have increased capacity through extra resources to allow the work to realign. Can I be told what that extra resource is? Is it temporary or will it be there in the longer term to ensure we reach that target? Thank you, Chair. And the other one, Chairs, would be, it's not always doom and gloom, Chair. I would like to congratulate the staff on the invoices paid to date, because I think that's extremely important when it comes to our economy and keeping our small businesses going. So I think congratulations where it's due should be said. So well done to the staff on that. Chair, the other one that I raise on a regular basis is, of course, the amount spent on agency staff. And I see that they're trying to work on that, but that's a considerable amount still on agency staff, and it's extremely worrying. I have asked many times, and I'm reluctant to put a freedom of information request in, given our target's not great as it is, but I would like to know, apart from OPIS, what other agency staff do we use and how much is spent on that, please? Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Councillor McGee. I'd now like to invite Councillor Lloyd Bundy to introduce the report, please.
Sorry, Chair, I missed Councillor McGee's first comment. the two MSs at the start?
MS12 and MS13, Councillor. Page 12.
Thank you.
I think if you can't find the relevant stuff there, Councillor Bunday, if you could just
Yeah.
respond to Councillor McGee via email later on today, that would suffice.
Yeah.
Thank you.
I'll also try to get you some details on the agency staff. I must admit, I am pleased as well, and you've stolen a little bit of my thunder that over 97% of our invoices are paid within 30 days. I think that's very important, and certainly with the trying times that we've had, the sooner we pay invoices to our suppliers, the better. So moving on to the report, the purpose of the report is to provide an update on the Council's performance across a range of services as measured by the Council's suite of corporate performance indicators at period 7, which is October 22. You might have noticed that this month we have included a new KPI, which is STP 38 at the request of Councillor Binley, and that is the percentage of housing rent collected, which is reporting at 91.11%. The percentage of environment information regulation requests completed in 20 working days has dipped. It was in September 98%, and it's now down to 88.43%. That is 107 out of 121 requests. To mitigate this, resources are being added. One of the things that I was concerned about was the number of data breaches, and I'm led to believe that the figure is quite low by comparison to other authorities, but there is one data breach in there which is a reportable data breach, and I'd like to inform members that the breach was a wrongly addressed letter, and that subsequently was opened by the wrong person, and that was the data breach. It's also good to see that the percentage of customer complaints upheld has continued to drop, and only 4 out of the 128 complaints upheld in October. That's 3% against a target that we have of 20%. Also, the number of complaints made to the local government ombudsman remains low at just 4 in October, which again, I'm pleased to report. I'm happy to propose the recommendation of paragraph 3, Chair, and happy to take any questions.
Okay, thank you very much, Councillor Bunday. Members, do you have any comments on this report? Councillor Pentland.
Thank you, Chair. Just wanted to draw attention to section 7.9.3, where it refers to the generation of new performance indicators in relation to the carbon management plan that will be coming forward later. Be pleased to see those come forward in the near future, as they'll be really important on this journey that we're on. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Pentland. Councillor Binley.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. I'd also just like to really pay thanks to officers who, under very, I think, strenuous times with regards to the financial climate, are doing a huge amount of positive work. I draw specific reference to AFL 17, which is actually on page 54, whereby the comments actually state that we've only got 5 people in out-of-area placements, which was a record. However, at the end of last week, we beat that, and it's now actually down to 2. I don't think there are really any of the sovereign authorities in the area, previous sovereign authorities, that could have boasted that achievement. So I really do just want to say thanks to the team who are working in incredibly difficult times and the hard work that they're putting in. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Councillor Binley. Any other comments, members? Okay. So the report has been moved by Councillor Bunday. Can I look for a seconder, please? Councillor Brackenbury, thank you very much. So the recommendations are set out on page 32 of the agenda pack. They've been moved and seconded. Can I have a show of hands in favour, please? Jolly good, thank you very much. So we now move on to item 6A, which is the draft budget 2023-24 on MTFP. Councillor John McGee, would you like to come and address the meeting? Again, maximum of 3 minutes. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. I will be brief because it is going out to consultation and we will have ample time to go through the fine detail in the coming weeks. But I do have some concerns, Chair. How realistic is it that we will bring this year's budget overspend and mitigate that so that we're not carrying another few million over to next year? How realistic is that? And I'm extremely disappointed in the Children's Trust and the lack of mitigation on the amount that they've overspent this year. And that puts a big weight on this council. And I know we want everything the best for the children, but we have to balance a budget, so the Trust should be able to balance that too. And it's going to cost us a lot more next year. Chair, I never got the addendum that came out last night due to IT problems, so I can't really speak on that. But I do know that Janice and her team and their forecast was quite on the spot. It may have been a couple of 100,000 out, but looking at the bigger picture, that's not bad at all. So well done to Janice and the staff. What I do have concerns here is not so much next year's budget, and I'm glad one of the local MPs is here. Perhaps they could go back to government and lobby for this council, because the change in council and business rates going forward will put this council in a real difficulty in the oncoming years on the medium-term plan. So we as a council together across the political parties should be lobbying government that we do not lose net millions from business tax rates, or the people of North Northants will suffer greatly. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Councillor McGee, and thank you for acknowledging the hard work of what the officers have done to get us to this position. It's the ever-shifting sands when trying to do a budget, and I know Janice and her team have worked extremely hard, and Councillor Bundy as well. So I'd like to put on record the thanks of this administration as well. But thank you for your comments. So I would now like to turn to Councillor Bundy to introduce the report.
Thank you, Chair. Just to answer Councillor McGee's question about the overspend from this year and how it's going to be mitigated in future years. The budget for next year is predicated on the history of this council, so what we did last year, but also the closest and the most material reports that we had for this year. As you know, we monitor the accounts of this council on a month-by-month basis, and reports are brought to this committee. And those are what we use to actually work through. So any overspends that are already in this year's performance will be actually informed into next year's. So, moving on, Chair. Today, subject to the executive approval, we'll start 5 weeks of consultation on this council's draft budget for 2023-24 and the medium-term financial plan. Residents, local partners and other stakeholders will have the opportunity to review the proposed budget and provide feedback during the 5-week consultation period, which will commence following this meeting. As I have said on many occasions, this does include elected members, whether they are from the majority Conservative group or of the minority groups represented on this council. This draft budget is not something that has been arrived at overnight. It is the culmination of months of hard work. On the 9th of February, this executive will consider the results of the consultation and then set out the recommendations to full council, which will meet on the 23rd of February. I cannot foresee any reasonable argument for full council to accept any amendments to this recommendation on the day of the meeting if they were not brought forward during the consultation period. Indeed, any such amendment proposals must be perceived as political showboating or plying for the electorate for votes. During September, each directorate entered into capital programme challenge sessions, asking each directorate to revisit the capital plans and aspirations for the coming years, with a desired outcome to review each one of its deliverability and profiling. This exercise gave us a better forecast of planned borrowing and serviceability of funding for the general fund going forward. During the first week of November, each directorate embarked upon a budget challenge session, with each one offering economy of savings and sharing the challenges that they envisage over the next year and into the medium term. The forecasts for this were based upon the results of the financial year 21-22, with a forecast as of period 6 of the year 22-23. Later on in November, each directorate was subject to a scrutiny review of this year's forecasts as of period 6. So in summary, so far the draft budget that I am presenting today has been the subject of over 8 hours of capital projects challenge sessions, 13 hours of budget challenge sessions, and over 15 hours of period 6 in-year scrutiny. In January, we have planned scrutiny sessions by directorate during the consultation period. Outside of these meetings and sessions, there have been many more hours spent shaping this budget into the document that we have before us today. This first report focuses on the General Fund and also notes the planned use of the Dedicated Schools Grant, which is a ring-fenced grant allocated to the authority by the government to support a range of education-related services. The Department of Education currently operate a 4-block funding model for funding schools and pre-16 education, including early years. The level of funding received for North Northamptonshire is set out in the chart at Appendix C and paragraph 1.3, and it amounts to just shy of £348 million. Appendix C sets out in detail the background of the DSG and how the Department of Education arrive at their funding. It also sets out the pressures and risks that children's education pose to this council, predominantly on the rise of special educational needs and disability demands. The budget will underpin the priorities contained within the council's corporate plan, which has the following 6 policy areas: helping people to lead active and fulfilled lives, building better, brighter futures, develop safer and thriving places, create a green, sustainable environment, build connected communities, and develop modern public services. I said last year that we were living in unprecedented times. Little did we know that as we emerged from the challenging times of the pandemic and lockdown, we would be hit by further events both on a global and national level that would present new challenges and inflation levels that we haven't seen for many years. This has resulted in there being significant changes to the Council's medium-term financial plan compared to the position modelled just less than a year ago. It is very clear that the assumption of government is that councils will set their council tax to the maximum. The revenue account for this council has 5 main income sources, which are council tax, business rates, government grants, fees and charges, and where necessary, the use of reserves. It is imperative that this council does everything possible to maintain and grow the local resources that are within its control. Council tax revenue is the most stable form of income that this council has. Although we have a balanced budget for 23-24, we are forecasting a budgetary gap of nearly £18 million in 24-25, rising to £54 million in 25-26. By not raising council tax, we would forego £36 million over the medium term to 26-27. And assuming that the referendum cap returns to last year's levels, this figure will rise to in excess of £70 million over the same period if we held council tax at last year's levels. It should be noted that NNC is in the bottom third of unitary councils when comparing Band D council tax. Should also be noted that the majority of properties within North Northants are Band A, which will result in an increase of just £1 and a penny per week. Not raising council tax would inevitably put at risk this council's sustainable future, plunging this part of Northamptonshire back into the very dark days of Northamptonshire County Council. So the main headlines of this draft budget are: a balanced budget for 23-24, further investment to protect vital services and invest in service change and improvement of around £57 million. Efficiencies and income generation include new direct service grants of around £17 million. This includes the continuation of the savings already included as part of the 22-23 medium-term financial plan, and which remains deliverable with the remainder being met through improved business rates, income, council tax and government grants. Planned savings and pressures from previous medium-term financial plans, which remain to be delivered unless there is a requirement to change the assumptions following review. The use and retention of reserves to support non-recurring investment in service improvements, fund time-limited projects, pump prime invest to save schemes and help manage risk. The investment in social care recognises the increase of national living wage from 1st of April 23 to £10.42 per hour and the reversal of the 1.525% increase in national insurance contributions to care providers. An increase in council tax consisting of 2.99% from the core council tax and 2% for the adult social care precept, which results in a new Band D equivalent council tax of £1,657.51, which is an annual increase of £78.78, or a weekly increase of £1.52. No change to the local council tax support scheme, which will continue at 25%. Inclusion of the contingency a contingency to mitigate against uncertainty, which totals £3.8 million and is equivalent to around 1% of the council's net budget. This recognises that there remains uncertainty in funding and spending predictions. Officers will continue to seek efficiencies in order to help address the budget requirements for 24-25 and into the future. Between the time of this report being published and our meeting today, the government has published their provisional local government finance settlement, which sets out the detailed funding allocations to individual councils. This has resulted in a shortfall of £138,000 against an original estimate for around £336 million of general fund resourcing. This is the net result of several changes, and we have produced an addendum to this report that sets out these movements. In the main, we have seen a change in our business rates baseline assumption due to a number of factors linked to the complexities of the recent revaluation and our subsequent move from a top-up authority to that of a tariff, making us subject to a levy. Members may recall that we have a reserve established to smooth the risks associated with business rates, and accordingly I propose using £138,000 of this to meet the shortfall. As I've said on many occasions, this draft budget requires buy-in from every member, officer, employee and partner of North Northants Council. It is offered not as an aspiration of the Finance Department, but as the intentions of each directorate. And with that, I'm happy to propose this draft budget and the recommendations of paragraph 3, Chair.
Okay, thank you very much, Councillor Bunday. And members, have you got any comments in relation to the budget? Councillor Harrison.
Thank you, Chairman. I'd like to echo everybody else's thanks to Janice and the team and to Councillor Bunday for the immense amount of hard work that's gone into bringing this budget together, often with very tight deadlines and government announcements coming very late in the day. It's been a real challenge, but we've got there. And I'm absolutely delighted that we've shown some of our priorities in the development of this budget, particularly in adult social care. We're continuing to invest in adult social care, which will help us to protect some of our most vulnerable people in North Northamptonshire with better and excellent services. The increased money going into adult social care will help us, Councillor Bunday mentioned, in being able to manage the increase in the national living wage across all of our providers, but also protect us to be able to deliver those services with the demographic pressures that are continually coming our way. So, I'm absolutely delighted with this budget and would like to thank everybody involved. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Councillor Harrison. Any other comments? Councillor Pentland.
Thank you, Chair. It is really pleasing that this balanced budget is coming forward, that is, as Councillor Harrison says, delivering for the residents of North Northamptonshire. And I know that moving forward, a keen eye will be kept on the finances, as has been done. Pleased to see the continuing commitment in relation to looking after the environment and tackling climate change, which is set out at 13.34 to 13.39 of the report. And I know that strong commitment will continue as we move forward. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you very much, Councillor Pentland. Councillor Ullman.
Thank you, Chairman. Yes, I'd like to thank officers in the Place and Economy Directorate for their work and for their finance colleagues for their help. And just note that despite the pressures of inflation and things like the fuel price increase, which is a big effect on us, they've managed to maintain all the services. Indeed, we've been able to invest in things like new street lighting and new vehicles, many of which are electric at the same time. So I congratulate everybody involved in producing the budget, and I'm sure it will be successful.
Okay, thank you very much. Councillor Brackenbury.
Thank you, Chair. And like other members, I'd like to thank Janice and the team and Councillor Bunday for all the enormous amount of hard work that's gone into it, as well as people who have responded and fed into the larger piece of work. It is obviously a little disappointing that we have some uncertainty in government policy going forward, but again I can see that to some extent is inevitable with the unknowns on inflation and what's going to be going forward in terms of medium-term fiscal policy for central government. It is important that certain things coming forward, such as new homes bonus and so forth, are clarified as soon as possible. And I obviously hope that DLUC are taking the feedback, which I'm sure they're getting from multiple local authorities, strongly into account. But other than that, I mean, congratulations, Councillor Bundy and Janice and the team for producing such an excellent budget. And it's all to do again next year, no doubt. But at least here we are in a good place. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much, Councillor Brackenbury. And I'd just like to add, look, it's been very challenging, hasn't it, this year, the year before, and the outlook's very challenging. And I think, this demonstrates what a financially fiscal council should look like, and we are investing in so many areas of our services, in our staff, within our equipment, and so on moving forward. So absolutely well done to everyone who has had a part in this, our staff, and obviously Janice and her team, and elected members. And I think we need to never underestimate what we have delivered. There's an extra £1.5 million investment within our highways has come out this year as well, on top of the existing contract sum. We are spending money, but we're doing it in a prudent fashion, and giving our residents the results for what they pay into. So thank you for everyone for this. So I know Councillor Bunday has moved the report. Can I look for a seconder, please? Councillor Harrison, thank you very much. So the recommendations are set out on page 72 and 73 of the agenda pack. They've been moved and seconded. Can I have a show of hands in favour, please? Jolly good, thank you very much. So we now move on to item 6B, Housing Revenue Account Draft Budget 23-24 and the Medium-Term Financial Plan proposals. And I would like to invite Councillor Lynn Buckingham to come and address the meeting for a maximum of 3 minutes, please.
Good morning. Excuse me. And thank you for the opportunity to speak on this, which is a very important subject to me. The HRA, there's much work to be done on bringing the HRAs of the two sovereign councils together over the next few years, but that also includes vision and full understanding of the issues involved of the council as a landlord. A balanced budget is the golden goose for most financial institutions, but a balanced budget is nothing without the improvements and standards that are needed. Balanced budgets won't fix the problems with damp in our properties, making our children ill. It won't fix the problem with cold, drafty homes where tenants struggle with heating their homes, and it certainly won't help people who have been waiting for repairs for years. We need to invest in our properties. It's noted that there is an increase of £40,000 to start on the repairs backlog, which, although welcomed, is not enough. This year's plans to also raise the rents by 7%. This is the government rent cap. Councils don't have to raise it by this cap. It's a maximum. It is noted the expected raise was going to be 4%. What will NNC standards be in the future for our HRA? How will the voices of our tenants, not just the few members of the TAP, be heard? Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Councillor Buckingham. I would like to invite Councillor Lloyd Bundy to introduce the report, please.
Thank you, Chair. I think Councillor Buckingham raises quite a few points, some that probably are for this forum, but some probably that aren't for this forum. I will liaise with the relevant portfolio holders and we will get back to you with a response. What I would say is that since I first became a councillor more years ago than I care to remember, one thing that always surprised me was that the tenants, certainly the tenants of the Legacy Authority of Kettering, which is where I was from, the tenants always wanted the maximum rental increase that was possible, purely and simply because they knew that if they paid more, they would get more investment in their property because you can't go anywhere else. So, you know, I'm comfortable with that side, but as I say, I will make sure that we put a proper response back to you. The purpose of this report is to present the draft housing revenue budget and medium-term financial plan to executive. This will then go out for consultation with our tenants. The HRA does not directly impact the council's wider general fund budget or the level of council tax. Income to the HRA is primarily received through the rents and other charges paid by tenants and leaseholders. North Northamptonshire is required to run a single housing revenue account, but for the short term is operating two neighbourhood accounts to reflect stock holding from the two legacy borough councils of Kettering and Corby. The council has started to move towards consolidating these two accounts into a single HRA. This work requires a 30-year business plan that will be informed by the housing strategy for North Northamptonshire that is currently being developed and will be reported to members during 23-24. The housing revenue account is a separate ring-fenced account within the council for the income and expenditure associated with its housing stock. Government guidelines for rent increase were introduced in 2020 and were intended to run for 5 years to 2025. This formula to maintain service provision and continue investment was CPI plus 1%. Members will recall that this followed 4 years of 1% per year reductions, which cost the HRA around £130 million over the period of the business plan. When this current policy was set, CPI was running at 2%. CPI in July 2022 was 10.1%, meaning that rent increases for next April would be 11.1%. And after consultation, it was announced by the Chancellor in September that social housing rent increases for 23-24 would be capped at 7%. In line with previous years, the proposed increase in rent for both neighbourhood accounts will be the maximum permitted, i.e. 7%, which will help maintain and protect levels of service. Taking into account this increase, the draft neighbourhood accounts for 23-24 show a balanced position. The proposed new rent levels are reflected in the table at paragraph 2.10. The medium-term position shows the Corby account in deficit and the Kettering account in surplus. This is a result of how the self-financing of the loans were structured. The medium-term position also assumes a rental increase of 4% per annum. Northamptonshire own 8,160 properties ranging from 1 to 4 bedroom houses, bungalows and flats, combined with a further 893 leasehold properties. This amounts to a projected rental income in excess of £35 million. A breakdown of the types of properties can be found at paragraph 4.2. The Council is required by law to avoid budgeting for a deficit in the HRA, so the budget must not be based on the total HRA revenue reserves falling below zero. In practice, the Council is expected to maintain a reasonable balance of HRA reserves to cover contingencies. The Chief Finance Officer reviews the level of balances required to support the housing revenue account spend annually as part of her risk assessment of the budget. The Executive Director for Finance and Performance has assessed the minimum levels of balance, taking all known risks into account, and has recommended that it should remain unchanged at £800,000 for Corby neighbourhood account and £650,000 for the Kettering neighbourhood account. The minimum balances for the two neighbourhood accounts are around 4% of the total budget. Details of reserves together with any estimated movements are set out in Appendix C. Numbers of right to buy properties and the numbers of empty properties must also be taken into account. The number of right to buy sales assumed during 23-24 and the medium term for Corby neighbourhood account is 50 and for the Kettering neighbourhood account is 30. Void levels are assumed to be 0.9% for Corby and 1.5% for Kettering. Paragraph 4.12 to paragraph 4.15 sets out the government's right to buy scheme and the changes during the pandemic. The current economic climate has made provision for new social housing challenging. It is envisaged that a further 18 homes will be added to the Corby stock at Cheltenham Road during 23-24. Further schemes will be reflected in the medium-term financial plan when there is more certainty around the time delivery and future housing schemes. Paragraph 4.22 to 4.28 sets out the Council's approach to the self-financing of the two neighbourhood accounts, which explains how the Council holds a depreciation charge which is then used to support the capital programme. Holding social housing stock does come with risk. Paragraphs 2.29 to 4.30 sets out the Council's provision for bad debt due to rent arrears. Sorry, I think that should have been paragraphs 4.29 to 4.30. Finally, paragraphs 4.31 to 4.33 reflects the cost of employment within the HRA. I'm happy to propose the recommendation in paragraph 3, Chair.
Okay, thank you very much, Councillor Bunday. And I just wanted to make some comments on some of the points that have already been made. There's clearly been a massive lack of investment over the years by Corby Borough Council on some of their housing stock. And this is something that we're dealing with on a daily basis here with this administration. And we will continue to do so and to give members of our public, the best type of social housing that they can possibly wish for. And that's something that's paramount for us to deliver upon. The feeds into the 7% increase in the rental costs, Councillor Buckingham, where the Tenants Forum, which is made up of tenants across Northamptonshire, have overwhelmingly sort of been approval of this amount. They understand, to bring the properties up to standard, there needs to be that investment, and that's something as an administration we will do. But I would like to open up this debate to members now. Councillor Binley.
Thank you, Chair. And first of all, of course, I want to start off by thanking all of the team involved in this. I know that some people's calculators got very worn out during the process, and I think there's been a huge amount of work put into this, and it's, I think, very positive, especially given the circumstances. Councillor Bunday quite rightly mentioned earlier on about COVID. If anybody thinks that, of course, COVID's gone and forgotten about, then unfortunately they're wrong. We're still dealing with the hangover from COVID, and it still affects us in our day-to-day life. We then, of course, saw those unprecedented circumstances of things going on, outside of this country and in the wider global field with regards to what's been going on in the Ukraine and the huge implications that that has had on us and the rest of the world as a global economy, and the issues it's caused with supplies, with prices. Not only have we had increases in prices for our parts and everything with regards to the housing team, but also we're struggling to get certain parts because of the wider implication. And when we talk about the 7% rent cap, and Chair, I'll go on and talk about some of Councillor Buckingham's comments in a moment and hopefully be able to address some of them. The 7% rent cap, should we do it? I think there's two questions really there. Should we do it? Do we want to do it? No, I don't think we do want to do it. I mean, we are a Conservative administration. We wouldn't raise prices and increase costs if we could help it. However, should we do it? Yes. You've got that price increase is way below the rate of inflation, and if we are, as you have said, Chair, going to continue improving the service and offering that level of service that the people of Northamptonshire deserve, then yes, absolutely. And I know that those consultations are being undertaken with the Tenants Advisory Panel, and they are very, very supportive of that. Again, as Councillor Bunday said with regards to what used to go on in KBC where they had their discussions, again, we're getting the same feedback because the tenants understand that for us to invest in that area, we have to increase prices. Unfortunately, we can't deliver services just by saying thank you to people. It doesn't work like that. We have to exchange money to make sure that we're able to provide that level of service. So thank you to all of the team who've been involved in that and the absolute sterling work that they've done. Just to pick up on some of the comments with regards to things like home improvements, out of this, there's a capital investment increase in Corby for £1 million. Kettering, it's £540,000. There are schemes on there in the capital investment programme with things like Homes for the Future and, of course, the retrofitting of properties. But that's incredibly expensive. And we are talking about an ageing housing stock, as you said, Chair, that has been underinvested in for a very, very long time. And we've got to get that up to standard now. As we know, we've got to get these properties up to an EPC rating of C or above by 2030, as that is a government target set to us. So we have to do that. The comment about people waiting years for repairs, I'm not quite sure where that's come from, Councillor Buckingham, because we don't have any people waiting years and years, as you said. In fact, if I look at the figures, since May, since the end of May, may remember that something happened in June, there's been a reduction in the repairs by 20.2% since the end of May. So that goes to show that we are working on it. This budget goes further to address the issues with the backlog in repairs. There's an investment of 500k in Corby. There's 400k in Kettering to clear that backlog. Yes, it is enough to clear that backlog because that's absolutely what the team have been working incredibly hard on to make sure that we have got the funds there to clear this issue that we have been left with off the back of COVID. Let's not get this wrong either, Chair. This is not something that all of a sudden we caused on vesting day as NNC. These are issues that we inherited. As I've said, services have a cost, and I think this is absolutely the right thing to do with regards to this budget. And I'm incredibly pleased with what the team have done, and I look forward to the next financial year when we see those repair backlogs cleared, and we also see that continuing investment in the social housing in Northamptonshire, in both the Kettering and Corby areas, where those properties are retrofit and brought up to standards that we expect for our residents.
Thank you very much, Councillor Vinley. Looking around the room, is there any other comments from members? No. Okay, so if you look at the recommendations, which are set out on page 176 of the agenda pack, Councillor Bunday has moved the report. Can I look for a seconder, please? Councillor Howes, thank you very much. And if we can go to the vote, please. Have hands in favour. Thank you very much. So we now move on to item 6C, Capital Programme 23-24. I'd like to invite Councillor Bunday to introduce the report, please.
Thank you, Chair. This report sets out the baseline capital programme for 23-24 and the medium-term financial plan for North Northamptonshire Council. With the revenue and housing revenue budgets will form part of the budget consultation process, which will commence once the draft budget has been approved by this executive, and it is envisaged that consultation will commence following this executive meeting and run until the 27th of January 2023. As I said previously, residents, local partners and other stakeholders will have the opportunity to review the proposed budget and provide feedback during the 5-week consultation period. This does include elected members, whether they be from the majority Conservative group or the minority groups represented on this council. The draft budget is not something that has been arrived at overnight. It is the culmination of months of hard work. And on the 9th of February, this executive will consider the results of the consultation and then set out its recommendations for full council on the 23rd of February. During September, each directorate entered into capital programme challenge sessions, asking each directorate to revisit the capital plans and aspirations for the coming years, and the desired outcomes to review each one as its deliverability and profiling. Projects have been reprofiled or deferred into the development pool until further business cases can be considered as part of the wider Northamptonshire scheme. As part of the challenge process, 71% of the general fund and 79% of the HRA underspends have been reviewed. These proposals will also be taken into the Finance and Resources Scrutiny Committee, and their committees will be considered on the 9th of February by the Executive. The total capital programme announced to some £94.9 million, consisting of the General Fund programme of £52.1 million and the HRA programme of £43.7 million. Members are reminded that there is also a development pool of £173.6 million, which includes schemes awaiting formal business cases. Through the year, capital update requests have been brought to the Executive meeting to bring forward further items. This report also sets out the proposed capital programme for the medium term up to 2026. Paragraph 5.2 of this report sets out the key principles that underpin this Council's capital strategy. The General Fund Capital Programme can be found in Appendix A, Housing Revenue Capital Programme Appendix B, and the Development Pool in Appendix C. The minimum revenue provision reflects the minimum amount of the Council must charge to the revenue budget each year to set aside a provision for repaying external borrowing. The increase in the MRP provision is £1.549 million for 23-24 to provide for this. It should be noted that the disaggregation of the capital assets, balances and debt are still to be finalised and subject to audit for the 2021 financial accounts of Northamptonshire County Council and Corby Borough Council, and this may have implications to the current assumptions. Paragraph 5.8 sets out the policy of the Public Works Loan Board for future funding. I'm happy to propose the recommendation of paragraph 3, Chair.
Okay, thank you very much, Councillor Bunday. Can I have a look at any members wanting to speak? Councillor Lorman.
Thank you, Chairman. First of all, I'm advised that I only have a personal interest in the development pool, so I'll not talk about that. But if I may, I'll talk about the General Capital Fund, and it's wonderful to see such a wide-ranging and full investment programme that we've been able to achieve, both in things like street lighting, in roads and in new junctions, and in a cycleway possibly for Corby that's part of our Greenway project. But one thing I would like to inform members, we've had recently site visits to look at the possibilities of having the changing places fitted, which is a wonderful thing for the disabled people and activities. So one in East Carlton Park and one in this building, so both in the former Corby area, and I'm sure members will welcome that, and hopefully more of a programme to come there as well.
Thank you, Councillor Lorman. Councillor Penton.
Thank you, Chair. As Councillor Lorman alluded to, there are a number of really good projects in the capital programme, particularly relating to reducing emissions. It may come as some surprise that I'd like to draw attention to the significant investment into improving woodlands and the planting of trees. And that investment is across a number of years and will be really good for the area to see that come forward. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Councillor Penton. Councillor Brackenbury.
Thank you, Chair. And just following on from Councillor Lorman's comments, he wasn't going to talk about the development pool, so I will. No, I'm very pleased to see quite substantial external investment going into the development pool, notably on the Corby Town Fund, which I will be bringing up a little later on in this meeting, and also investment from the UK Shared Prosperity Fund and the Levelling Up schemes which have been going on. So I think this council has got a good record in securing external and often government contributions. So let's just keep that on, keep that going, and it very much reinforces the capital position. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Councillor Brackenbury. Okay, so the recommendation for the paper has been moved by Councillor Bunday. Can I look for someone to second that, please? Councillor Brackenbury, thank you very much. So those recommendations are set out on page 198 of the agenda pack. They've been moved and seconded. Can I have a show of hands in favour, please? Thank you very much. Okay, item 7, Specialist Care Centre, due diligence and recommendations. I'd like to invite Councillor Helen Harrison to introduce the report, please.
Thank you, Chairman. The purpose of this report is to provide the Executive with the information required regarding the various negotiations, terms of prospective agreements, financial implications and risks in order to make an informed decision regarding committing the Council to taking on the running of a specialist care centre for the benefit of residents of North Northamptonshire. In North Northamptonshire, we have 2 specialist care centres which are under PFI contracts and run by West Northamptonshire Council due to a decision that was made prior to vesting day. Those 2 centres, plus 2 more in West Northamptonshire, were built in 2003 to provide 51 beds each of reablement care in a residential setting for people over the age of 65. These centres were run by Shaw Healthcare. The occupancy level of the SCCs was low, and in 2020 the County Council entered negotiations to bring the running of the centres back in-house. Shaw remained responsible for the facilities until the conclusion of the PFI, at which point the buildings would transfer to the ownership of the council in which they sit. Occupancy levels continued to remain low, from 30% at worst and often not more than 50% occupied. Since vesting day, North Northants Council have used beds at both of the centres in the north, Spinneyfields in Rushden and Thackley Green in Corby, bought on a spot purchase basis, that's pay for use, from West Northants Council. Our usage averaged at 25 beds at any one time. Unfortunately, we were unable to place people with higher levels of need in those facilities and had to commission that support from the independent sector. So that need for greater care was up to 10 people at any one time. So this council requires between 20 and 35 reablement beds. In April 2022, West Northants Council informed us that they were reviewing their use of the specialist care centres and, based on our historic use, allowed us to use 25 beds at Thackley Green in Corby and ended our use of Spinneyfields as they required the beds for their own use. Both centres continue to be underused. Currently, Spinneyfields has only 16 of its 51 beds open, and Thackley Green has 32 beds open. We were approached by West Northants Council to take on the running of Thackley Green and started due diligence work. It was also made clear more recently that if we were unable to take on the centre, West Northants Council would have to close it. We've looked at 4 options. Option 1 being to continue as we are, spot purchasing reablement beds in Thackley Green from West Northants Council and making up the shortfall in beds by commissioning from the independent sector. This option has immediate risks due to the likelihood of West Northants Council closing Thackley Green, meaning we'd have to commission all beds from the private sector spread across our large geography, making it more difficult to maintain consistency and quality, increasing travel for our therapists and social workers, increasing the amount of training that we'd need to provide to the independent sector. Even if the centre did remain open and available, it does not provide the level of reablement that we require for that population. Option 2 would be to take on the running of both specialist care centres. We only have a need for up to 35 reablement beds at any one time. Across the 2 specialist care centres, there's 102 beds. If we ran the centres at under occupancy in the way they're being run at the moment, we'd still have all the fixed costs and duplication of staffing. This wouldn't be a responsible use of public funds. Up until very recently, it was our understanding that West Northants Council required Spinneyfields for their discharges from hospital, and we therefore focused on the clear availability of Thackley Green. There may be future opportunities to explore taking on the second facility as a mixed model in partnership with our health partners, strengthening the integrated care system. Option 3 is to commission all bed-based reablement from the independent sector. Some of the downfalls of this option have already been explored at option 1 due to the likelihood of Thackley Green being closed if we don't take it on, including the increase in travel for therapists and social workers, inability to control the quality and consistency, and the increased need for training across the independent sector. It also makes little sense to have 2 closed facilities across Northamptonshire. Option number 4, which is the preferred option, would be the taking on of Thackley Green. This is the preferred option as it minimises the risks of the other options whilst giving the council control over the building, staffing, quality of reablement and ability to deliver to people with greater needs. The building's fit for purpose will enable staff to be in one place, reduce travel time and reduce overall costs. I believe that this option gives us the best opportunity to deliver high-quality services, develop our staff, and explore options to partner with our NHS colleagues on mixed models of reablement in a shared setting. The financial modelling of these options is set out in Appendix A in great detail, and hopefully you've all had a chance to read through those, and there's quite a lot of complex information in there. Table CO brackets 1 is the current option, what we do currently. It shows our current position and it's reliable as it uses known data. The rest of the financial estimates are based on modelling and a number of assumptions, therefore the actual outcomes could clearly be different. And I'd just like to say at this point that an absolute phenomenal amount of work has gone into the modelling of these different scenarios. It's been picked over and gone over with a fine-tooth comb, and I'd like to thank all the officers who've been involved in that really detailed piece of work. What I would like to say is just to summarise overall that none of the options are cost neutral to the council. All will incur additional costs. The recommended option of taking on the running of Thackley Green is estimated to cost around £600,000 per annum extra. It's at the lower end of the modelled costs. It has the massive advantage of the reablement services to be in one place and to be controlled entirely by the council. It also gives the best opportunity to work with our NHS partners to develop a mixed model of reablement, which could save the money for the council in the future. But perhaps the most important factor is that it will enable us to improve the quality of care for our residents. I'm sure there'll be further questions, but I would like to propose the recommendations at 3.1. And it is recommended that A, and I'm going to read through these quite carefully, we consider and note the content of the report, in particular the due diligence undertaken, legal considerations in subletting a specialist care centre and risks identified. B, note the ongoing negotiations and commitments with system-wide partners to utilise various funding sources such as winter discharge monies and Better Care Fund. C, consider and note the various financial modelling scenarios set out in Appendix A and Section 7.1 of this report. To D, approve option 4 as set out in Section 3.3 of the report, which also authorises the progression of work to finalise agreements to take on the running of one specialist care centre, Thackley Green in Corby, subject to, and this is important, subject to satisfactory negotiations with West Northamptonshire Council and Shaw Healthcare regarding the respective variations and terms of the agreement, having no additional adverse financial, legal or contractual implications that are not already referenced in this report. And finally, to delegate authority to the Executive Member for Adults' Health and Wellbeing in consultation with the Executive Director of Adults' Health Partners and Housing to finalise and complete any legal agreements in relation to this decision. Thank you.
Councillor Harrison, well done. It's a very complex report, and I know the amount of work and effort that's gone in by David and your whole team to get us to this point. And this is about better outcomes for our residents, isn't it? It's about doing the right thing for our residents. And this is a plan that will lead us down that path. The Shaw PFI has been a very complex one, and I know members in this from the other side of the chamber will remember the scars that we had at the County Council on this. And I'm still somewhat not sure how we've managed to get ourselves into a predicament where we have two assets within our side of the county that have gone to the west. But that governance process that allowed that to happen can be looked at another day. But I wholly support this paper and thank everybody for their hard work to get us to this point. So on that, I'd like to open up discussion from members. Councillor Brackenbury.
Thank you very much, Chair. And I echo a lot of what you've just said. It did seem extraordinary that the West had control over the two assets in North Northamptonshire. But anyway, I digress. Firstly, I'd like to thank you, Councillor Harrison, for your very clear run-through of the options on the table here. I mean, it's made it much easier for people who are not involved in this area to understand it. And I'd also like to echo your thanks to Mr. Watts and all the team. It's obviously done a heck of a lot of work in coming to this very sensible and balanced paper. It does seem clear that option 4 is the best. One good thing about that is it actually makes the Thackley Green a centre of excellence. Everything's there. It's one spot. So it's got advantages, obviously, for patients, but it's got advantages for staff and for training and for development and for all of that. And the building concerned is fit for purpose and has the capacity. It's interesting to note in the report that in certain circumstances, if ever the capacity were needed, Spinneyfields might be an option going forward. But that, anyway, that perhaps is for another day. But in the meantime, once again, thank you for a very clear brief on this excellent report, and I very much welcome it.
Thank you, Councillor Brackenbury. Spinneyfields is clearly on my mind. Councillor Harrison.
Yes, thanks for those supportive comments. And I think it's important also to note that This is another example of where this council is making a priority of investing in adult social care and better services. And I think that's, that's come out in our budget setting and it's come out in our priorities here today. Hopefully it's coming out in our transformation of provider services as well. And, I will constantly and strongly bang on the drum for that. And that kind of leads me neatly into thanking Janice and her team, because they've put in a huge amount of support as well in helping with that financial modelling. And I know that if we can't convince Janice, things don't happen. So I would just like to say thank you for putting your faith in this project, and I am absolutely convinced that it's going to become a jewel in our social care crown, and possibly a model for us to look to for the future in Spinneyfields as well.
Thank you, Councillor Harrison. And let's not forget the legal eagles, because nothing moves without the monitoring officer giving it the nod either. I've learnt that quite quickly. Not throwing you under the bus there, Adele. Okay, so Councillor Harrison, you have moved that report. Can I look for someone to second the report? Councillor Bunday, thank you very much. So the recommendations are set out on page 221 of the agenda pack. They've been moved and seconded. Could I have a show of hands in favour, please? Thank you very much. We now move on to item 8, disaggregation of the Joint Sensory Impairment Service for North Northamptonshire Council and the establishment of a new operating model. I would like to invite Councillor Scott Edwards to introduce the report, please.
Thank you, Chair. The purpose of this report is to provide an overview to the Executive of the Sensory Impairment Service revised model, outline business case, and to seek approval to implement the proposal recommendation as set out within the report. Just like to add that the service is invaluable to those residents that need this, and these are some of the most vulnerable children, and it's highly recommended and regarded as an excellent service that is provided by North Northants Council at the moment for the entire of those that need it in Northamptonshire. Subject to consultation with affected staff, agreement with affected schools and legal input, the recommended option would also see the potential transfer of some specialist staff, I can't say that word, sorry, who already work within schools directly under school employment, as is already the case for the majority of schools within the county requiring specialist support for students. This would release a potential saving of 0.31 million from the current budget, which will be provided through the dedicated schools grants. The complexity of the task of supporting these children is recognised by the Department of Education in insisting that teachers who teach and support pupils with a hearing or vision impairment should hold a mandatory qualification. Schools have a statutory duty to provide the highly specialist support identified in educational health and care plans for students with a sensory impairment. This includes support from specialist teachers, IT specialists, mobility officers, British Sign Language instructors and specialist resource adapters. These roles currently work across the county to ensure that specialist support can be provided quickly at the point of need. The Sensory Impairment Service aims to raise the aspirations and improve the outcomes of children and young people with hearing and or vision impairment ages 0 to 19 years by identifying and meeting their needs at an early stage and positively impacting on their progress with educational settings and the home. The team currently has a caseload of just over 1,020 children and young people spread broadly evenly across both Northamptonshire Council and West Northamptonshire Council geographies. The Sensory Impairment Service is currently hosted by North Northamptonshire Council and provides services across both North and West Northamptonshire Council. The hosted arrangement is governed and monitored by the inter-authority agreement between both council and is made up of 55 employees. It was originally agreed as part of the Unitary Authority's blueprint that the service would be disaggregated with an original target date of the 1st of September this year. However, subsequent detailed review and completion of an impact and options review highlighted some significant risks associated with this approach, most of which would have a direct impact on the ability of both councils to deliver a safe and effective model to those that need it. Traditional disaggregation with the aspiration of creating two equally effective teams would not fulfil the user need without the requirement of significant growth and the duplication of key roles. There is a national shortage of specialist qualified teachers, and so the required recruitment would expose both councils to significant risk of being unable to meet their statutory requirements. There would be a fall in service standards and failing vulnerable children and young people. The current total cost of the service is just over £2 million, which is funded through contributions from West Northants Council and North Northants Council via their dedicated schools grant, in line with the agreement made at Local Government Reform Services, which is 56% and 44% to us, which broadly reflects the distribution of service activity across the areas. Staff within the service are employed by North Northants Council, and income is received from West Northants Council to offset a proportion of these costs. In the new model, this will become a trading arrangement where North Northants Council continues to employ staff but are commissioned to deliver services by West Northants Council. This arrangement being subject to an 18-month break clause on either party to provide certainty of delivery and financial stability. This report is also going to West Northants Council Executive in January, and the recommendations on page 248 are set out.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much, Councillor Edwards. Any comments from members? Okay, no. So, Councillor Edwards, I'm sure you're proposing the recommendation.
Absolutely.
Can I look for a seconder, please? Okay, Councillor Harrison, thank you very much. The recommendations are set out on page 236 of the physical agenda pack and 248 of the electronic agenda pack. They've been moved and seconded. Could I have a show of hands in favour, please? Thank you very much. So we move on to item 9, asset disposal policy. I would like to invite Councillor Lorman to introduce the report, please.
Thank you, Chairman. North Northants Council has inherited an extensive, disparate and varied portfolio of properties and assets at local government reform, both operational and commercial. And officers are currently assessing all of our assets and properties to see whether they fit into our plans and needs, whether that be for running our services to residents, providing space and opportunities for recreation, or enabling a vibrant and growing economy. This includes ensuring our data is up to date and accurate. An asset strategy is due to be brought to Executive next spring, and as some of the portfolio will turn out to be either surplus to requirements or better managed or developed outside the Council, whether sold or leased, we now need a policy to ensure any disposal is appropriate and well governed. The Council is required to dispose of any surplus assets in good time, as well as achieving best consideration, which includes social value considerations, and this policy assists in this. There is a clear disposal process that is transparent and logical and enables efficiency, normally using open market in what can be a complex legal area. This policy supports the capital strategy and can reduce revenue costs in many cases. Importantly, it will ensure the involvement of ward councillors and the Asset Rationalisation Scrutiny Panel, external partners and all directorates to ensure any potential use is considered through a new asset management group, who will use certain tests to arrive at an appropriate recommendation. I'd like to thank the panel, the Asset Rationalisation Scrutiny Panel, who discussed this policy and agreed with it and emphasised the importance of considering and consulting ward councillors. Accordingly, I commend the recommendations in paragraph 3.2 to the Executive.
Okay, thank you very much, Councillor Lorman, and I absolutely welcome the engagement with local ward members when we look to dispose of assets in their areas, and they should be given due notice of that where applicable. Looking for comments for members around the room. Okay, so Councillor Lorman, I understand you've moved that report. Can I look for someone to second the report, please? Councillor Binley, thank you very much. There's been moved and seconded. The recommendations are on 246 of the physical agenda pack and 272 of the electronic pack. Can I have a show of hands in favour, please? Okay, so we're just going to do item 10 now, which is the carbon management plan, which after we'll just take a very short 10-minute comfort break. So, Councillor Pentland, if you'd like to introduce the report, and then the look on your face, I think you're going to do it quite quickly.
Thank you, Chair. Actually, I'm going to take my time on this one because I've got a report coming forward. Yeah, this one's an important one. So, carbon management plan. Pleased to be bringing this forward. It's much anticipated and, as I said, an important plan for the Council in relation to our commitments to tackling climate change locally and looking after the environment. So this plan sets out the Council's baseline carbon emissions and the means by which NNC can reach carbon neutrality by 2030. This is a living document which will be regularly reviewed to ensure an accurate reflection of the situation. Specifically, the carbon management plan breaks down the priority areas of the Council's emissions, such as buildings and fleet, and it sets out the current position in relation to these areas, what is already being done and what can be done moving forward to reduce emissions. The management plan will inform the use of the £1 million set aside as part of this year's budget and the subsequent years moving forward. And it's vital that we have this management plan and the baseline figure to ensure that the money is used in a way that yields the biggest return. The Council, as part of this project, has also joined Investors in the Environment, an independent organisation that will audit and review the Council's progress moving forward and provides an additional layer of accountability. There may be, as we move forward, some fluctuation in the figures as part of this, but that will be because we are getting better at understanding our emissions as an important part of the learning process that we're on. So if approved, it's proposed that the carbon management plan will give a platform to generate short-term action plans for specific areas of funding, and officers have worked hard to produce this document, drawing on the best practice, and my thanks go to them, as well as members of the Climate Change, Environment and Growth Executive Advisory Panel, whose discussions and feedback have informed this plan. The Council is clearly continuing to affirm its commitment to protecting the environment and tackling climate change, and I would be grateful for the support of my colleagues for the recommendations set out in section 3 of the report. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Councillor Pentland, and I absolutely welcome this report, and I welcome the document attached, your document around what's going on, and the in-depth view that you and the team have made on this journey in such a short time. Carbon neutrality 2030 shouldn't just be a buzzword, it should be a real plan, and I think you've certainly cemented that plan with this document, so well done to you and the team. Thank you. Councillor Harrison.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you, Councillor Pentland. This is a great report. And as you say, we've been looking forward to seeing this. And what I was always impressed by from the words go with you, Councillor Pentland, was that you were not going to commit this council to something without knowing the detail of that and having a proper plan in place. And that has always been your methodology so far. And it's great to have this plan in front of us now today. I mentioned this to you the other day, and I'm going to cheekily mention it today. I heard a report the other day that scientists have found that our mature trees are actually removing double the amount of carbon than was previously known. I wonder if that's immediately going to bring our footprint down. Thanks.
Okay, Councillor Howe.
Thank you, Chair. Yes, excuse me, I welcome this report and congratulate you and your team on the appendix, what's it called? That's the document. It's actually an excellent read. If I could remember the name, that would help. I do note that the leisure decarbonisation is specifically mentioned in there, and obviously with the ongoing costs that we are well aware of in the leisure industry, and you know, our leisure centres are just bleeding funds really because of the costs that are associated. through utilities and such. And I note that we're looking at things such as heat pumps, solar energy sources, LED lighting, and much more. And from my perspective, in my portfolio, sooner the better, I would suggest, because that would go to some way to mitigating the increased costs that we have within the leisure service. So yes, fully congratulate this and hope that there'll be some significant funding coming our way, maybe through government or whatever, to help us realise these ambitions. That would be really interesting. So thank you.
Okay, thank you, Councillor Howe. Councillor Brackenbury.
Thank you, Chair. This is in fact a remarkable document, and if you reading into it, the level of detail is really impressive. It is very interesting to see the amount of carbon emissions which are produced by our closed landfill sites, which are still a substantial chunk of our carbon emissions, dwarfing the emissions made by our fleet. And it's always been a general principle that we should be good stewards of everything that we do. And this, obviously, the carbon issue and the carbon crisis that we face has brought all this into sharp relief. And also, I think it's probably worth noting that the vast increase in energy costs, partly caused by external factors, the war in Ukraine and so on, again, concentrates the mind. So I absolutely welcome this report. I welcome some of the clever stuff in it and some of the thought that's gone into it. I mean, as an example, there's a suggestion of reducing pressure by 10% in the generation of compressed air, which will make a noticeable saving. And I don't know how or who thought that up, but it just is a single one illustration of the level of detail that the team, which obviously Councillor Pentland, and this team must go right across many of the directorates here. So it shows the amount of support that Councillor Pentland and the climate agenda have across Northamptonshire, and the amount of input that's come to make this excellent document, which I very much welcome.
Thank you, Councillor Brackenbury. Councillor Lorman.
Thank you, Chairman. Yeah, I think the important point is that this document gives us a baseline to work from and a starting point, but also I will continue to press for some of the things in here. The document makes clear that the Place Directorate is a significant contributor, but has been working very hard. I think of things like we've been buying zero-emission vehicles, we've been converting vehicles to HVO, and there are innovative things like our partnerships with Voi for the scooters and Starship for the delivery robots, which will all save the last mile fuel, and also Liberty to put EV charging points in. Even in our contracts with people like Kia, we have put in conditions about them using zero-emission vehicles over time, and even for their suppliers as well. So we've been actively walking the walk as well as talking the talk. And of course, it mentions in the report things like food waste coming, but I would just appeal to people to reduce the amount of waste that there is. And the report is excellent and gives us real something to work forward going forward.
Thank you very much, Councillor Lorman. So I'm going to go back to you, Councillor Pentland, if you would like to sum up and move your report.
Thank you, Chair, and thank you to my colleagues for their comments there. It's a big challenge ahead of us, but one, as I've said, we're taking incredibly seriously, and lots of work has been going on prior to this management plan and whilst it was being developed as part of that journey. And it falls to all the different directorates across this council to play their part in reducing it, ensuring we're not working in silos, because if we work together, that's how we really get a grip on this. And I'm pleased to see that work is already underway, and particularly the comments made by my colleagues about what their areas are already doing and have plans to do, and that's referenced throughout the other reports that we've had come forward today. As we say, this gives us a good starting point, and I have no doubt that we'll build on this in the future to make sure that we're doing right by the residents of Northamptonshire, which ultimately has a bigger knock-on effect further afield as well. So I'd like to propose the recommendations as set out. Thank you.
Councillor Pentland, thank you very much. Can I look for a seconder, please? Councillor Howes. Thank you, sorry. Thank you very much. The recommendations are on page 252 of the physical agenda pack and 290 of the electronic pack. Can I have a show of hands in favour, please? Thank you very much. And as promised, we will now have a 10-minute comfort break. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Right, so we now move on to item 11, Planning Advisory Service Peer Review and the report and associated action plan. I would like to invite Councillor David Brackenbury to introduce the report, please.
Thank you very much, Chair, and looking forward to an interesting discussion. I'm glad this is the item after the comfort break, not before, because it might take a moment to run through. But you will remember, Chair, that soon after I came on the executive in September 2021, we announced a review of the planning service in Northamptonshire. This was obviously logical because it was quite soon after vesting day, and obviously the planning service was still very much operated in its core areas from the former sovereign authorities. And of course the County Council. Northamptonshire Council invited the Planning Advisory Service to come in and to do a root and branch review of the planning service offered by Northamptonshire Council. And they came in September, and they did indeed conduct a wide-ranging review. They discussed matters with members, they discussed matters with officers, and they also went out to a wide range of stakeholders and individuals, parish and town councils, individual users of the planning service, consultants, planning agents, and many other people. And before I go on, Chair, I'd like to thank everybody who contributed to what I think has been a very valuable exercise indeed. So the review was considered and has now reported, and that is at Appendix A of this report. And you will notice that it is a warts and all review of the planning service in Northamptonshire. They highlighted some really excellent and good practice. They highlighted the fact that Northamptonshire Council welcomes growth and renewal. It invited this review to take place in the first place, and obviously we welcome the outcome of it. The review noted the commitment that Northamptonshire Council have to transformation and development and developing a single planning service. They noted strong and sometimes excellent relationships between members and officers. They noted the commitment of some very hard-working staff. And again, I'd like to take this opportunity to thank everybody in the planning service for their commitment and hard work since vesting day. We know it's not been easy, and we do very much value the enthusiasm of so many of our planners and their desire to have the best planning service that we can offer in Northamptonshire. The review welcomes good relations with both regional and strategic partners, both in terms of developing planning policy, but also in engagement on a more regional basis with the organisations such as SEMLEP, the Central England, England's economic heartland. Thank you very much. It went way over my head there, and other similar bodies. That has, I think, been very much appreciated. Northamptonshire is in fact delivering its planned growth, both in terms of housing numbers and in terms of employment numbers and opportunities as well. And we continue to stick to our policy of having a balanced employment offering with high quality jobs in a wide range of employment opportunities, not putting all our eggs into one or only a few economic possibilities. The review also highlighted strong record in delivery of planning policy, which has been going on for many years on a Northamptonshire basis, And some colleagues will note the good work that was done by the former Joint Planning Unit and former Joint Planning Committee, which worked on a Northamptonshire-wide basis for a number of years before vesting day. And so, ladies and gentlemen, where does this leave us? We've got the review of the planning service, which you will see at Appendix A. They've come up with a lot of recommendations, and they've highlighted, quite rightly, areas where the planning service is not performing quite as well as we would like it to. It's noted, of course, that we are coming from an area where there were four or and a half planning teams, which, you know, is a invitation, if you like, to silo working. The recommendation of the review is to change the committee structure from representing simply the four former sovereign authorities plus the county council to having a more unified mix, and so that will be something that will be considered in part of the action plan. But the action plan now is to set up at pace, Mr. Chairman, because we do need to move on this. So I'm actually very pleased that we are today considering the actual peer review report. And today we are being recommended to approve the formation of a planning transformation board and associated governance arrangements, and to actually get on and start working to address some of the shortcomings in the planning service and to get change and transformation driven forward at pace. Before, however, I say that that's just an easy thing to do. We recognise it's not at all easy. It will require careful resourcing. It will require careful time management of officers, because while we transform the planning service, it's very important to point out that the day job doesn't go away, and we still have to provide as good a planning service today as we possibly can going forward. So transformation will improve the planning service, but let's make sure that we do these things in a measured way so that we continue to deliver as we transform. With regard to the proposed Planning Transformation Board, membership of that board has been agreed upon by myself and the leader. We are intending to have the first meeting of that board, assuming the executive agree with the recommendations. We intend for the first meeting of that board the first week in the new year. That will set the terms of reference. That will also examine the proposed action plan, which you will note in Appendix B of the report, and we can then start driving that forward. We'll also agree the terms of reference for the Planning Transformation Board, because it's important that this board helps the planning service do what the planning service does. You know, the planners are themselves the experts, and it is pleasing to see the quite complex governance arrangements of subcommittees representing all the various areas of planning, so development control, enforcement, planning policy, and so on, that will feed back into a unified planning team. I do commend the hard work of everybody who's fed in both to the planning service peer review, but also to the transformation of the planning service that is coming down the tracks. It's not an easy piece of work. I really do congratulate colleagues on their positive morale and cheerfulness with all this. No one likes change in a sense, but it is something that for it to be as effective as possible, change has got to come from the people to whom change is being applied. So we don't want it to be change being done to the planning team. We want change to be done by the planning team, and we will as an executive, and we will as the Planning Transformation Board, provide as any resource, well, not literally any, I see Mrs. Gott's slightly blenched there, but we will provide any suitable resource to ensure a smooth transformation while improving the service and giving the best planning service that North Northamptonshire can provide. We want North Northamptonshire to be an exemplar for planning service, because it'll solve so many of our problems if we do. You know, we've got staffing issues, but if we are a beacon authority, that will really improve that. So I commend this report, Mr. Chairman. I commend the recommendations at 3.1. There are 5 of them. They are to note the content of the PAS peer review report and its recommendations, to consider and approve the review action plan as set out in Appendix B, and to approve the formulation of a planning transformation board and governance arrangements as set out in Appendix C, to agree the process of transformation to be reported back to scrutiny on a 6-monthly basis, and to agree that the PAS peer review report and the associated action plan are published on the Council's website as soon as reasonably practicable. Not all planning advisory service peer reviews are in fact published, but it is the desire of the leadership and Northamptonshire that this report be published, that what we're doing about it be published, and I think that will be of comfort to the residents and other stakeholders who use our planning service in Northamptonshire. So without further ado, Chair, I propose the recommendations at 3.
Thank you, Councillor Brackenbury, and I welcome the report, and I certainly welcome the recommendations in that report. And I think you talk about publication of the report. I think that's a mandatory for us. I think we need to be open, transparent about the issues that we're facing in the planning team department at the moment, and we need to look to begin that journey. And I notice you used the word pace on quite a few occasions. I will be watching it very closely to ensure that pace is paramount in this turnaround. And I won't have any qualms as the leader of this authority to sort of put pressure on you as the executive member to make sure that delivery at pace happens. I am disappointed to see that the Assistant Director responsible for this area is not here today. I would question that later on to understand why he hasn't appeared. I think on that note, I will move over. I know my colleague to my left here would like to say a few words.
Thank you, Chair. I welcome this report, and thank you for your words on this, Councillor Brackenbury. I think it just goes to show, doesn't it, that this council and this administration welcomes scrutiny, be it internal or external. And I think it's only right that we review our working progress throughout this administration, and that we take on board exactly what recommendations have been made here, and we act upon those at pace, as you said. It's really interesting, isn't it, that we do have some very good points raised. We do have some areas that we need to do a lot of work on. But we wouldn't find that out if this administration wasn't open and we didn't welcome this type of scrutiny and this type of review. So I think it's really good that we as an administration recognise that we don't know it all, and we go out there, we find the answers, and we fix things. So, yeah, thank you very much, and I'm very supportive of this, and I can't wait to see this move at pace, as you say. Thank you.
Councillor Lorman.
Thank you, Chairman. Yes, I welcome the report. Planning is one area that involves and touches many of our residents, probably more involvement directly with the council than many others. So I happen to sit on 2 of the planning committees from the former 5 sovereign authorities, and I know one achieved a top rating and got many compliments from developers and partners such as Vistry and the Ministry of Justice in their work, which isn't to say that there aren't issues which PAS have highlighted, particularly in enforcement. I think we're all aware of that one. And the report looks to achieve a balance between what goes to committee and what doesn't, which is important for efficient working, a consistency of reports and consistency of decision making, and also that we need to reward our staff properly through proper pay and grading. So I welcome all these reports, things that PAS have picked up, and I join everybody else in hoping and looking forward to an improvement in the service.
Thank you, Councillor Lorman. Councillor Harrison.
Thank you, Chairman. And I too am really pleased to see this review and the recommendations set out. As Councillor Lorman mentioned, as councillors, it's one of the things that gets raised with us sometimes, as much as potholes, or nearly as much as potholes, people's gripes about planning and the system and when things aren't going well and how their plans are being handled and so on and so forth. And so, you know, it's really important that we have a service that works really well, that we can be confident in when we're talking to our constituents. So this is a really important step forward. You know, I obviously think that what I do in my portfolio is the most important part of the council, but most of my residents don't really talk to me about it, but they do talk to me about planning. So thank you.
Councillor Harrison, don't worry, you are very important. Councillor Howe.
Yes, thank you, Chairman. So as Councillor Brackenbury has said, that he was only in post a few weeks, and then we suddenly realised we needed to review our planning service. I think that there is that is a coincidence, Councillor Brackenbury. You do not need to worry. But seriously, Chairman, I think the recommendations in this report, when we all probably read it, it sort of clarified some of the thoughts that we already had. And I think the two things that I like about this is the fact that there's a board being set up. It's going to be member driven with the exec director as well as the portfolio holder, and you know, that's key, because I think it's going to sort of hopefully change what we all possibly consider as fundamentally wrong within that area of the local authority. And also it's going to come back to scrutiny, and as I think Councillor Harrison said, you know, the scrutiny function is going to be a valuable part of this process. So I'm really looking forward to finally seeing some significant change within a department that, as we've already said, residents complain to us continuously about for one reason or another. So I'm really looking forward to seeing this kick in. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Councillor Howes. Councillor Brackenbury, back to you to sum up and move the recommendation.
Yes, thank you, Chair, and thank you, colleagues, for your supportive comments. You're absolutely right. Planning is one of those areas which probably affect more residents than almost anything else, apart perhaps from Councillor Lorman's potholes, because it covers everyone. You know, everybody has a view on planning, and however good the planning service, we will never please everybody at all times, because in planning there's almost always two sides to every story. However, let's make it as good as we can. So in terms of the comments that have been made, I mean, pace, absolutely. I think it is fully understood, both from the officer level, from the member level, that we have to move this transformation forward, you know, without making sure we keep the day job going, but we have to move things forward at pace. And I am well aware that the leader will be holding my feet to the fire, and not wanting to not return the favour, I'll be holding other colleagues' feet to the fire as well. We will be moving forward on this. So I welcome the early meeting date for the first meeting of the Planning Transformation Board. The welcoming of scrutiny, absolutely. We welcomed the Planning Advisory Service into North Northamptonshire back in September. We welcomed all the various interviews and discussions that they had with such a wide range of members and of officers, and, as I say, of external parties as well. They got a really good overview of our planning service. We We didn't hide anything under the carpet. They saw it all. And that is valuable for them. It's valuable for the conclusions of this review. And yes, we will, of course, be feeding back to scrutiny, but moreover, we'll be feeding back to members, because there is a great deal of interest from members of this council in the successful management and running of our planning service. So my door will never be closed to any member of this council who wants to pick up the telephone or pick up an email and ask me something about planning. I will always try and respond as quickly as I can. So good communications is the key to this, and good communications is a lot of what underpins some of the less positive comments in the PAS report. And finally, yes, it will be a member-driven board, the Planning Transformation Board, but we don't intend it to be a talking shop. This is not a sort of super scrutiny function. The Planning Transformation Board will be an operational board to manage and have oversight of change within the planning service. So we don't intend it just to be people having a little chat once a month about what's going on. We want to help drive transformation. So back to you, Chair. I fully appreciate the pressure on this. We have to deliver. And I know that from the Chief Executive downwards, from the leader downwards, there is officer-led and political pressure to get this done and to get this done right. And this is going to be a challenge, but I think it's going to be a very stimulating opportunity for Northamptonshire. And so finally, I once again move recommendations at 3.1 to A to E.
Thank you very much, Councillor Brackenbury. So, members, on 258 of the physical agenda pack and 328 of the electronic pack, the recommendations are there. They've been moved. Can I look for a seconder, please? Councillor Howes, thank you very much. And can I have a show of hands in favour? Thank you very much. So we now move on to item 12, the Corby Town Fund multi-use building. So I'd like to invite again Councillor Brackenbury to move the report, please.
Well, thank you, Mr. Chairman. A more straightforward, or at least probably a more brief report on this. I think, as colleagues know, we have had funding from central government through the Towns Fund, which is the Corby Town Fund, which is split into 4 projects. There's 9.5 million allocated for Sixth Form College, 8.59 million allocated to the Corby Town to Station Link Road, £310,000 to Smart and Connected Corby, and what we're talking about today, which is the multi-use building in Corby with an allocation of £1.5 million, which has been allocated through that Corby Town investment plan. This report seeks authority to delegate to the Executive Director of Finance, in consultation with the Executive Director of Place and Economy, authority to prepare and submit the business case summary document for this multi-use building. The multi-use building is in Grosvenor House, just down the way, and will be a building for various cultural and other functions. And we've already taken on board some comments from colleagues about the potential for having part of this building utilised as a community hub, which would also be quite valuable, it being in central Corby. So Grosvenor House has been the chosen site. There have, of course, been some financial decisions that had to be made. The original bid for the Corby Towns Fund was put in for £25 million. We actually received £20 million. So unfortunately, there has been a little bit of belt tightening. But it will be a very useful addition to Central Corby. It will, I think, increase demand for media and third sector uses. It will help make the town centre of Coolby a still more attractive place, and will improve footfall and will hopefully improve the economy elsewhere. People will go into some of the other shops and some of the other businesses and spend their hard-earned money there. So we're looking forward to unlocking those funds. The recommendation is, as I've already explained at 3.1, to delegate to the Executive Director of Finance in consultation with the Executive Director of Place and Economy to prepare and submit the business plan. That is a legalistic matter. Often these are delegated to myself in consultation, but in this case it has to be with the good Executive Director of Finance. And also, once the funding has been unlocked by government, once the drawdown's made, to delegate to myself, in consultation with the Executive Director of Place and Economy, the authority to spend such proceeds once received. So that is the recommendations which I hereby move.
Well, thank you very much, Councillor Brackenbury. So I know Councillor Howell here would like to speak on the matter.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you, Councillor Brackenbury. I welcome these funds into Corby Town Centre. This will provide a fantastic facility for not only the residents of Corby Town, but the wider community. And I also welcome the fact that this will be considered a modern cultural and community centre, and obviously as culture sits within my executive remit, I'll be very, very interested to see what and how that moves forward. And I would ask that you perhaps try and engage with some of my officers when we're looking at culture, because we are looking at culture as a whole throughout the whole of Northamptonshire, and we would like to see where this sits within that cultural offering throughout Northamptonshire. So I really would hope that you would engage with my officers. I know Kerry and Jack from Chester House as well can provide an awful lot of assistance in providing that cultural link with all of the other stakeholders that we have within the cultural community. So please do engage with them and see how we can work and how it can fit within the structure of the culture that is throughout the whole of Northamptonshire. So yes, I would fully welcome this, and please do engage with our officers on that. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Deputy Leader. And Councillor Pentland.
Thank you, Chair. I think we should support the recommendations set out. I know that the Town Deal Board and the various stakeholders on that have had detailed discussions around this, and I think this project, as part of the wider project, will do fantastic things for the town and ties in with the levelling up that this council is trying to drive forward for our area. So very supportive.
Thank you, Councillor Pentland. Councillor Harrison.
Thank you, Chairman. Yes, it's great to see this investment coming forward, and it's really important that that business plan is submitted in order that we can get hold of that money and get on with developing the project, which, as described already, is incredibly important for this area. I'm pleased to hear that there's still the possibility of maybe that building, multi-use as it is, possibly being seen as a community hub, or at least in part a community hub. And from all the meetings that I've been in recently with the local area partnerships and the community wellbeing forums, which are part of our sort of place-based integrated care system structures, that our partners are very keen to look at what buildings we all have and who needs to be in them, and how we can deliver services in a way that is along the lines of the community hub model. So if this could be part of it, that's great, and it'll be interesting to carry on working on those types of plans as we go forward. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Councillor Harrison. So I'm going to come back to you, Councillor Brackenbury, if you could briefly just sum up and move the report once more, and we will find a seconder.
Yeah, well, thank you, Chair, and I will sum up very briefly. Thank you very much for your supportive comments. Councillor Howell, I completely agree with you. I think that's once we've unlocked the funding from central government, which is the purpose of this paper, then the work will start, because then I think we will want to start working out what we're trying to do, how we're doing it, what's going to happen, and start reaching out to stakeholders who are going to want to move in and perform these cultural things. So certainly reaching out to Kerry and to Jack and to colleagues in your area, I think could well be very valuable. As also, again, the discussion on what's going to go into this community centre will start once the funds are unlocked. So again, I completely agree with what you're saying, and let's see what we can do to assist, and absolute communications between yourself in your area, my area, and Councillor Howell's area, I think will be key to a very successful project. So back to 3.1, I still recommend it.
Well done, Councillor Brackenbury. Thank you very much. So could I have a seconder to that? Councillor Howell seconds that. So the recommendations are on page 268 of your agenda packs and 362 of the electronic packs. They have been moved and seconded. Can I have a show of hands in favour, please? Thank you very much. So we move on to item 13, Northamptonshire Corporate Parenting Board Annual Report 21-22. And I'd like to invite Councillor Edwards to introduce the report, please.
Thank you, Chair. You'll see the report that is attached to it, and my thanks to those members that are part of the Corporate Parenting Board. You can see Councillor Laura Lorman in the audience as well, who plays a vital vocal point in that meeting, and as do many of the others, and thank you for that. The Executive is asked to consider the recommendation set out in Section 3. While there are financial and other implications to recommendations, if they are not approved, an opportunity will be missed to promote Northamptonshire's Children's Trust corporate parenting strategy, encourage greater fostering sufficiency, ensure that all employees of the Trust and NNC are aware of their corporate parenting responsibilities. If this is approved today, it will come back to Olivia, who chairs that meeting, to come back with the financial implications of this, and we'll set it out. We're looking to create a policy of becoming a fostering-friendly council. At the moment, that is not clear on what that will fully be, but we will discuss that and then bring that back to the Executive as well. The report was submitted to and agreed by the Corporate Parenting Board on the 29th of September. The board includes the Trust CEO, Director of Children's Services, and the Trust and 2 councils, both executive members, Children's and Families. Good corporate parenting means actively promoting the outcomes that good parents want for their children. Local authorities' corporate parenting responsibility is set out in legislation and has been emphasised in further statutory guidance and publications. The board remains a single entity covering the whole county and meets 6 times per year. Each council has 5 elected members sitting on the board, with Councillor Fiona Baker and myself chairing the meetings alternatively. Through the year, the board has fulfilled statutory obligations to provide oversight and scrutiny of key annual service reports, including those of the virtual school, the independent reviewing officers, health and fostering adoption services. Young people's influence over the board has increased, and it continues to liaise closely with the Children in Care and the Care Leavers Council. Care experienced young people have attended the board to share their experiences and presentations and have featured real-life case studies. And I'm pleased that they are 2 young people that actually sit on the board as well. Substantial progress has been achieved in meeting the challenges of the board set out by Ofsted and the Northampton Children's Trust Improvement Plan, and the board looks forward to continuing its evolution. The recommendations do set out that it approves the establishment of a corporate parenting operational groups, which is on page 19 of the annual report. This is where some members of that will report back to the Corporate Parenting Board on certain aspects of that report. I recommend the Corporate Parenting Board and the recommendations set out on page 370.
Councillor Edwards, thank you very much. Members, do we have any comments to make in respect of this report that's been brought forward? Okay, thank you very much. So, Councillor Edwards, I'm sure you would like to move this report. Can I look for someone to second the report, please? Councillor Harrison, thank you very much. So the recommendations are on page 276 of the physical agenda pack and 370 of the electronic pack. They've been moved and seconded. Can I have a show of hands in favour, please? Thank you very much. So we now move on to item 14, and that's the School Minor Works Programme. And I would like to invite Councillor Edwards again to introduce this report.
Thank you, Chair. The Schools Minor Works Scheme commissions condition surveys on property within the local authority's school estate. These surveys direct the condition works which need to be undertaken to ensure that the local authority fulfils its statutory obligation of keeping pupils safe, warm and dry. All local authorities receive school condition allocation funding annually from the Department of Education, and North Northamptonshire Council's school condition allocation has been confirmed as 2022 to 23, £1,946,829, and 2023 to 24, £1,947,000, a total school minor budget of £3,893,829. The proposal supports the Council to continue to fulfil its statutory obligation of maintaining its school's estate. The Council receives school allocations, funding from central government, and the purpose of which is to address conditional issues within maintained schools. The amount of SA funding each local authority receives is announced annually, and it's linked to the number of maintained schools within the authority area. The funding reduces as schools convert to academy status. Each condition survey provides a comprehensive report on the fabric of the school building and site and any work required to ensure that each building remains safe, warm and dry. Surveys classify any remedial work required into one of 4 categories identified, which is urgent, essential, desirable and desirable works not anticipated to be required within 5 years. It is anticipated that the budget will be sufficient to progress the required condition works, whilst leaving a small contingency sum within the wider budget to address any emergency works that are required at maintained schools within the council area over the course of the 2022 to 24 budget. Recommendations are on page 402, and I recommend it.
Thank you, Councillor Edwards. Members, have we got any comments to make in relation to this report? No. Okay. So the recommendations have been moved by Councillor Edwards. Can I look to someone to second the report, please? Councillor Brackenbury, thank you very much. So the recommendations are on page 282 of the physical agenda pack and 402 of the electronic pack. They've been moved and seconded. Can I have a show of hands in favour, please? Thank you very much. So we now move on to item 15, which is Rowan Gate Special School Mobile Unit Replacement. And again, Councillor Edwards, I'd like to ask you to introduce the report.
Thank you, Chair. This report is to provide members with the necessary information to consider and approve the capital project to replace the double temporary mobile unit classroom at Rowan Gate Special School in Wellingborough with 2 additional permanent classrooms. The cost will be funded primarily by the Department of Education High Needs Provisional Capital Allocated Grant Funding. The reason why we'd like to recommend this is that the school is currently oversubscribed with a shortfall of teaching and circulation spaces and currently does not comply with the Building Bulletin BB 104 standards guidelines for special schools. The replacement classrooms provide the necessary teaching and circulation space needed to comply with this. There is a deficit of 10 places across North Northamptonshire currently and will be in the forthcoming 2022 to 23 academic year. This proposal ensures that there is a good quality permanent capacity at Rowan Gate School. Rowan Gate Special School is a community special school for pupils aged 2 to 11 years. It can accommodate 100 pupils on the Wellingborough site, but was built for 90 pupils on opening in 1998. The school is designed to take 100 pupils, but currently has a PAN of 140. Therefore, the standards laid out by the DofE are not being achieved at the school through the lack of space. As I said before, the school is currently oversubscribed and accordingly has a shortfall of teaching and circulation. The anticipated cost of this proposed works is £1,660,100. The school will be a school-managed scheme with the council acting as a funding body only. All works will be funded from the High Needs Provisional Capital Grant funding that was allocated to Northamptonshire County Council by the DofE. It is estimated that the construction programme for the proposed works will take approximately 12 months, starting in summer 2023, completing summer 2024 in time for the September school time. The proposal will assist the Council in fulfilling its statutory obligations, providing a sufficiency of SEND places. The recommendations are on page 420, and I recommend we approve.
Okay, thank you, Councillor Edwards. Members, are there any comments on this paper? Councillor Lorman.
Thank you, Chairman. I really welcome this report. I mean, anybody who's ever been to Rowan Gate will be impressed with the facilities there, and I commend it to anybody to go and have a look. The pupils are some of the most challenging conditions that you can imagine, and the staff and the facilities there are top class in as what they are. It's a shame that they've had to work out of a temporary building since 2016. That really isn't good enough, and I'm really pleased to see that we're now able to move forward and give them the facilities. And Councillor Edwards has highlighted the number, the pound of 140, and the accommodation they actually have. I do commend this facility and really welcome that we're now able to move forward.
Thank you, Councillor Lorman. Councillor Howell.
Yeah. Thank you, Chair. Yeah, I fully welcome this report, and it's a long time, as you can probably imagine, since I was in a temporary classroom, but they weren't probably as warm and cosy as they are now. I suspect they were awful places way back then, but it always makes people feel that they have a sense of belonging when they have something permanent, and I think for children with special needs that is really useful. So building this on the school will help towards that, and I think it's, you know, we have to provide that level of service for those children. So yeah, fully welcome this. Thank you.
Thank you. No other comments from members? Okay, so the recommendation has been moved by Councillor Edwards. Can I look for someone to second that recommendation, please? Councillor Howell, thank you very much. The recommendations are on page 290 of the physical agenda pack and 410 of the electronic pack. They've been moved and seconded. Can I have a show of hands in favour, please? Thank you very much. So we move on to item 16, Kingswood Secondary School Bulge Funding. I'd like to invite Councillor Edwards to introduce the report, please.
Thank you, Chair. This report is to provide the Executive with the necessary information to consider and make a decision on the recommendations within the report to approve the Kingswood Secondary School funding agreement. Kingswood Secondary School is owned by the Greenwood Academies, and the proposal supports the Council to discharge its duty to promote high standards of education and fair access to education. The funding will be used to provide additional floor space so that Kingswood Secondary School may increase pupils' numbers. The project will be funded by the Department of Education Basic Needs Grant. The project is equivalent to 54 pupils in a year group, which will roll through from years 7 to 11, and then each year group will reduce back to the original PAN number. The DV new secondary school, Weldon Village Academy, opens in 2023, and the new school will provide 1,200 places. The capital investment will also provide a permanent capacity for future growth when needed. This will also provide the school with growth opportunities long term. It is proposed that the works will be project managed by the school, and the council will act as the funding body only. Any works progress will be governed by a legally binding funding agreement between each party to restrict the council's maximum financial liability in respect of the scheme. The Council is required to provide the following additional capacity to ensure it's fulfilled its statutory obligations for September 2022. Corby 54 temporary bulge places added at an area school to provide sufficient capacity for the 2022 to 23 academic year. Failure to provide sufficiency of places would also result in increased home to school transport costs, as students would need to be transported to other areas of the county. A surge in house building across the county, especially the smaller developments that do not trigger the requirement for provision of larger infrastructure, such as new schools, is continuing to impact upon the demand for school places across both the primary and secondary phases of education. The funding agreement is funded from the 2022 to 23 DofE Schools Basic Need Grant, and the funding is provided specifically for the purpose of maintaining school estates. Recommendation is on page 418, and I recommend this for approval.
Thank you very much, Councillor Edwards. Members, is there any comments in relation to this report? Okay, so the report has been moved. Can I look for someone to second that report, please? Councillor Brackenbury, thank you very much. And the recommendations are set out on page 298 and 299 of the physical agenda pack and 418 and 419 of the electronic pack. They've been moved and seconded. Can I have a show of hands in favour, please? Thank you very much. So we now move on to item 17, Earls Barton Primary School expansion. Again, Councillor Edwards, come to you to introduce the report.
Thank you, Chair. So this report is to provide councillors with the necessary information to consider the Earls Barton School expansion project, which will be funded primarily by Section 106 funding and supplemented by the Department of Education's School Condition Allocation Grant. The demand on pupil places in Earls Barton has increased as a result of new housing development by housing developers Redrow and David Wilson Homes, in particular the delivery of over 300 new homes. The developments are supported by Section 106 developer contributions allocated specifically to increasing the capacity of the primary school places serving the development of Earls Barton. The school was an infant and junior school originally, but amalgamated a few years ago into a primary school. And the amalgamation has left the school with the legacy of two buildings which are not linked and give the feel of two separate schools. In addition, there are two mobile classrooms on site which are in need of replacement with permanent classrooms, an upstairs classroom which is not ideal for modern teaching, and some undersized teaching spaces. The school currently has a pupil admission number of 75. Though any works would need to be taken into consideration, the school may increase to a pupil number of 90 at a time in the future, and works undertaken would need to support this. The project scope is to increase in a number of classrooms to facilitate and close as possible to the school, to link the infant and junior buildings together to provide safe and secure access around the school, relocation and expansion of staff car parking on the site, the removal and replacement of the mobile classrooms with two new classrooms to improve year group adjacencies. The estimated project start will be February 2024 with completion in February 2025. The anticipated cost of these works is £2.798 million, and as I said, will be funded separately. The recommendation is on page 424, and I recommend this for approval.
Thank you very much, Councillor Edwards. And look, come on, let's look at this item 14, 15, 16, 17 is continuous investment in our school and the future of our, children and the generations to come. It's absolutely fantastic news that we are continuing that programme of investment, and wholeheartedly welcome all of these reports. So going over to members for comments, I can see Councillor Pentland's got a hand up.
Thank you, Chair, and supportive, like you are, of this for the improvements that will make to the educational settings here. And also pleased to read about the renewable technology being proposed at section 7.9, which is welcome. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much. Councillor Lorman.
Thank you, Chairman. The ward member for Earls Barton hasn't asked to speak, but I'm sure she would join me in agreeing that this is most valuable, and it's nice to see more mobile classrooms being removed, because there isn't a suitable way to educate our young people. I've visited this school in the past in another guise, and it very much needs updating, and it's very welcome to see it. And thank you to those who've progressed this.
Fantastic. Councillor Brackenbury.
Thank you, Chair. Just a simple point, really. It shows that infrastructure is so important when we're talking about housing development, and of course there is housing development going on around all of Northamptonshire and the surrounding area. It is important to secure the investment that we need for infrastructure, and I think this is a small example of it, but it's a very welcome example of it.
Thank you, Councillor Brackenbury. Councillor Edwards, I don't know if you'd like to just quickly sum up some of those comments.
Yeah, no, thank you very much for the comments, and I think Councillor Brackenbury, you're absolutely right. It does show that actually forward-thinking council is that actually we're looking forward to that, and we're actually moving the future forward. Councillor Lorman, Yeah, absolutely. It's a fantastic school. It does need improvements, and you know that money is being put in there. And I too am, relieved that mobile classrooms are being removed for full building space, as we call it. And Councillor Pentland, sorry. Absolutely, renewable resources, the way forward. And I know you talk to me about it every week, and we've listened, and we do it.
Well done. Thank you, Councillor Edwards. Now you have proposed that report. Can I look to someone to second the reports? Councillor Lorman, thank you very much. So the report has been proposed and seconded. The recommendations are set out on page 304 of your physical agenda packs and 424 of the electronic pack. Can I have a show of hands in favour, please? Thank you very much. Okay, so we move on to item 18, the capital programme update for 22-23, and I'd like to invite Councillor Bunday to introduce the report, please.
Thank you, Chair. This is a regular report, and it requests approval for capital schemes that have come forward for the inclusion within the Council's approved capital programme. And as you said, Chair, it is a very, very good news story. 4 of the items of the 7 have been subject to other reports, reports 14, 15, 16 and 17, which Councillor Edwards has presented. There's 2 other educational ones there, which is Iresbrook Send College expansion of the school and Wren Spinney installation of mobile classrooms. Both those are funded by Send Capital Grant, and it's noted that all the capital improvement requests, which amounts to £9.696 million, are external funding. The final item on there is probably one that will warm somebody's heart probably more than the rest of us, is the authority's treescape scheme and planting more trees. And that's a budget approval of 260,000, just over 90,000 in the first year, 56.4 thousand in the second, and 56.4 in the third. Oh, I'm sorry, 56.4 in the fifth. So I propose the recommendations at paragraph 3, Chair.
Okay, thank you very much, Councillor Bunday. Councillor Pentland.
Thank you, Chair. And as we draw to a close this last meeting of the Executive of 2022, I really wanted to talk about trees as my final comments. Really pleased to see the funding there, which will be really important in the purchase of 940 trees. And as Councillor Harrison pointed out earlier, they are very important in reducing emissions, so that's good news for our area.
You're going to be busy.
Yeah, thank you very much, Councillor Pentland. No other comments there. So would someone like to second the recommendation on the report? Councillor Pentland, thank you very much. So the recommendations are set out on page 312 of the physical agenda pack and 432 of the electronic pack. They've been moved and seconded. Can I have a show of hands of favour, please? Thank you very much. So I can confirm that I've received no requests to consider any urgent items. Sorry? No. Okay, so we move on to item 19, which is the budget monitoring report. Councillor Bunday, if you'd like to introduce the report, please.
Thank you, Chair. The purpose of this report is to set out the forecast revenue budget outturn position for 2022 to 2023 for the General Fund and the Housing Revenue Account. The monitoring report sets out the material financial issues identified since the 22-23 budget was set in February 2022 and is based on the income and expenditure as at the end of October 2022, which is period 7. The forecast outturn for the General Fund is an overspend of some £6.176 million against a net budget of just over £300 million. This is an adverse movement of some £2.319 million to the reported position as at period 6, where the overspend was £3.857 million. The detail of movements against budget are set out in the report and summarised in the table of paragraph 4.3. Whilst there are a number of movements on the General Fund since last month, the overall increase is predominantly as a result of further spending pressure from the Children's Trust and higher spend associated with home-to-school transport. For home-to-school transport, an increase in spend has been reported following the outcome of the recent contracts awards for the start of the academic year and latest in-year monitoring position. Generally, the spend pressures for the council are driven by inflationary increases of pay and prices, mainly energy costs, and rising in sometimes more complex demand. We have previously applied £500,000 from the council's contingency budget to meet inflationary rises in line with the sum set out for such risk when the budget was set. Overall pressures have in part been mitigated through underspends in a number of areas across staffing and supplies and services. For period 7, the remainder of the council's contingency budget was applied to reduce the in-year impact of the costs arising from home-to-school transport, along with the pressures from pay awards and that exceeded the budget's expectations of 3%. The council also has a reserve available to call on for any balances remaining. However, it will look to achieve further in-year mitigations in the first instance. The housing revenue account comprised of 2 neighbourhood accounts for Corby and Kettering. The draft outturn forecast for the housing revenue account is a forecast overspend of £281,000 against an approved budget of £36.27 million. The HRA position has been affected by a number of factors, but the main movement in month is due to the application of agreed pay awards being higher than budgeted. The detail of movements against budget are set out in this report. The main issues, risks and unknowns that we continue to face are around the inflationary impact of the changes within demand-led services. The national and indeed global economy is seeing significant inflationary pressure that could not have been foreseen as at this scale only a few months ago. The Bank of England has increased base rates by 0.5% to 3.5% on the 15th of December. This is the 9th consecutive increase since December 2021, and the rate is at its highest level for 14 years. It is anticipated that more rate rises are likely next year, and some analysts suggest rates could reach 4.5% by the middle of next year. The inflation figures for November are slightly lower than in October. The 12-month CPI figure in November is 10.7% as opposed to October 11.1%. As mentioned earlier, councils, like most organisations, continue to see the impact of price rises, particularly around fuel and energy costs. A number of services are provided under contract, and it is likely that the authority will experience pressure from suppliers to increase costs. As part of the budget setting for 22-23, the council included growth to address forecast inflationary increases in light of the position known at the time. However, the significant and continuing increase in the rate of inflation has exceeded these expectations. Similarly, pay demands have outstripped budgetary provision. We are also acutely aware that the economic downturn has a potential to adversely impact service needs and future income generation, such as business rates. We recognise that it is and will continue to be a challenging time, but we will be working hard to balance our finances while protecting vital services, particularly those to our most vulnerable residents. I'm happy to propose the recommendation at paragraph 3, Chair.
Okay, thank you very much, Councillor Bunday. Members, is there any comments on this report? Okay, can I look to a seconder, please? Okay, Councillor Brackenbury, thank you very much. So the report has been moved and seconded. Can I have a show of hands in favour, please? That's fantastic. Thank you very much. So we'll go back to non-urgent items of business have not been received, so we won't be addressing any of those. I'd just like to take this opportunity to thank all of our staff, members and everyone else that's associated with this council for all the hard work that they've put in over this calendar year, and wish you all a very merry and happy Christmas and a prosperous new year. And I thank everyone that's attended today, and that brings the meeting to a close. Thank you.